Good afternoon, people. Welcome to today's class on computer applications in mining. So, how many hours are there? 20. Let's wait 1 minute more and then we'll begin. चलो शुरू करते हैं. Hold on, guys. So, welcome everyone. Today in this again computer applications and mining class, we will continue to discuss what we were doing last class yesterday. We are discussing right now the limit equilibrium method of slope stabilization. Uh, we have had some basic idea how these calculations are done. We have had some assignments that we did in rock slope technology, and we have some idea how these basic calculations are done, how if a simple block fails, how to calculate its factor of safety and to judge how stable the slope is, right? Yesterday, we also discussed how complexity of situations increase, so it becomes quite difficult to manually calculate a factor of safety for each condition, especially when we go for complex type of failures like a circular failure or a mixed type of failure. So using the same approach of planar failure that we learned for each calculations, we use the slicing type of method. And once these slices are made, we basically use the equilibrium equations to find out the factor of safety of this whole setup. So that was what we discussed yesterday. So we started a basic exercise of how things are done, but we had to rush it through last time. So today we will be seeing in more details uh, how how this limit equilibrium method can be applied for the slope stabilization purpose in our in this software. This software we have, this is called Slide. The Slide software is basically under a group package of rock science software. We have this package and licenses are there. However, license is not again, the license is not accessible for anyone outside NIT. So that is a difficulty we are facing right now. But what may be done is either some common account will be set up so that you guys can access the server, or what I will do is I will share these cracked versions. So the one I am showing you, that's why I'm showing you a simpler version, that is the older cracked version. The principles and all are same, only the graphics have changed. So at least if we know how things are done here, we will be able to do later on as well. So first of all, yesterday as we started, we defined what we'd want to do from a project. So we defined how the slope is inclined, what is the direction of the inclination of the slope that we will be making. So right to left, left to right, what kind of materials and supports will be there, right? We also decided on which methods uh, we want to study, uh, which are the methods that will be responsible for calculating these equilibrium equations. So as I was saying yesterday, each of these methods are basically different types of algorithms, different type of analysis that have been done by these scientists. So like Jambu and Spencer and all these guys have already created some empirical as well as some numerical relations. So these relations, when combined in form of the equilibrium equations, these are available with us in various literatures. So what this software has done is basically it has incorporated those equations, and uh, it has given us different ways in which basically we can find out the factor of safety. So if we just simply, if we want to find out what these methods are, you can do a very simple Google search. For example, a jumbo method, we can just search out what it is and where it is. So we can find some methods that that we can find out where it can be. Like, say this is the rock science literature itself, and here you can see how different methods that were listed that we had to select, right? Each of them have been given their own differences, their positives and negatives. So like the corps of engineers 1 and 2, these were two methods that we were seeing, right? The corps of engineer 1 and the corps of engineer 2. So what are these methods? How they are different? So in this, as they are saying that the interslice forces are basically oriented at differently in both of these methods. So in corps of engineer 1, the interslice forces are oriented to a overall slope or the overall circle, while in corps of engineer 2, it is oriented at the average slope here. So minor differences are there, which changes a method one from another and changes the factor of safety that we obtain. But ultimately, we have to know why this is done, how these changes, and which is applicable. Now, this jumbo corrected, if we see, they said that they have added a correction factor F naught to the original jumbo simplified safety factor. And why they have done it is because the jumbo simplified method basically on satisfies only force equilibrium and assumes zero interslice shear forces. The shear forces in jumbo simplified was not taken into account. So for factorizing that, they have basically made a factor, the correction factor that they have basically corrected in jumbo simplified. But sometimes this is not necessary, so they have also given an option for the simpler version in the software. So both of them, the jumbo simplified and jumbo corrected, both will be there. And so some details are given in of these methods, so we can, if we can at our time, we can go through it. What are the differences? Why factor of safety is different in each cases? So I don't want to take these methods one by one because there are many, not even limited to these like 8 or 9 methods that are given here, but there are many methods of this equilibrium balancing equations that have been developed. Some literatures are available, some books are available that we can go through. The whole concept is that why this is done, which place it is applicable, and which one is the one we desire from our work. So that's the whole point, right? So here we also saw we decided number of slices. We knew what is a tolerance. So we understood the tolerance is basically the point after which the iterations or the solutions stop to iterate. So at that point, the simulation will stop after it has reached the tolerance limit. So if it is given a tolerance of 0.005, that means if in consecutive iterations, the change in factor of safety is less than 0.005, the software will know that, okay, it is time to stop, and no further significant change is happening after each iteration. So that is the maximum number of iterations are given, right? And if we want, we can even give some customized function for interslice force interaction in one of these. So yeah, GLE method. So GLE method basically gives you an option to decide what is the interslice function. So it can be sine wave, it can be somewhere like a clipped sine wave or a trapezoid form. So that gives us basically a user-defined value of how interslice forces will act. But since we are not diving into deep into what the forces are and how they are behaving, so right now we use some preset equations that are already there. Okay. Groundwater we will be seeing later on. Stages, these statistical analysis, first we will be covering in rock slope technologies, then we will be coming in both of these cases. The sensitivity analysis is very important, how each factors affect the overall factor of safety and other parameters. Probability analysis, as I said, apart from factor of safety, there is a probabilistic analysis. So factor of safety, finding the factor of safety is something called a deterministic analysis. Deterministic analysis means uh, you basically find a single value, right? Probabilistic analysis mean you find a probability of this event to happen. So what is the probability of failure, or what is the probability that this slope will stay safe? So that probability, when we talk in terms of probability of failure, we go for a probabilistic analysis, and that is done in under statistical toolbox here. So random number generation is useful in statistics, and there are some advanced factors that if we want to go through, we can go through. But basically, uh, select the methods, select slices, select the direction, and that's it, right? So now we are ready to basically define a boundary or a slope geometry. Now, when we do such kind of work in the slope stability analysis, what data we have is basically either a field data that we might have collected ourselves. We might have known that, okay, we have an overall slope of 120 meters inclined at 60 degrees, like the questions we did in our rock slope technology assignment, right? So in that cases, what we can do is basically we can find out its coordinates by keeping one of these coordinates as 0, right? And once we have these coordinates, we can basically use those coordinates to build up geometry. So if we want to start making a boundary, we just press this add external boundary button that is here, or in boundaries we can go to the tab and add external boundary. And here when we click this, we have the option of uh, putting the coordinates. So suppose we start from the origin, we press 0 and a space and another 0. So x and y are put with a space. So x is 0, y 0 at the starting point. Let's make a 120 meter base. So 120 and 0 will be the next coordinates, right? Our height of the slope may be another 120 or maybe 150 meters. So the next coordinates will be 120, 150. Okay. And we want 2 benches. So let's put some upper berm at 40 meters or 30 meters. So it becomes 90 and 150, right? And we want certain inclination. So this we can do by ourselves, or if we have a calculated slope, then we can make accordingly, right? We want a certain uh, berm in between, so that ways. And when we are done, we can actually just press C to close the loop, right? So just by pressing C, we have defined that, okay, now we are done. So this is a boundary of a slope, as a very rough boundary that we have tried to see here. What happens inside is basically what we are interested in, right? So these kind of straight boundaries of slope we won't be getting in the field. So we will be having many nodes here. When we import any kind of AutoCAD file, or we transfer our photographs and digitize them to form the boundary, then also, so there are so many nodes. So many times we have to do some boundary corrections. So we have to basically simplify boundary and remove uh, those extra nodes so that uh, the geometry gets simplified. So that is what we can do. Otherwise, later on also we can right click on this full boundary and we can basically edit coordinates. So edit coordinates here, that becomes easier if we want to change or add some coordinates we want to do. Maybe we want to shift this 6 1 a bit towards the left side or right side. So we can, now this is 37. I want to maybe make it at 39. So I can do that and click OK to update it, right? I can do that. And even from here, I can move the coordinates as per my desire. So I can change it uh, as per if I want to make certain corrections, if I want to make minute corrections, or even if I want to add some, suppose new vertices and want to change their direction. So I can add individual vertices here, add vertices like this. So I have added a vertex, and by right clicking this vertex, I can actually move this as well. So basically what I am doing is, on the go, I am basically changing the geometry of my slope, right? So these all things can be done. Let's not do very strange kind of geometry. Let's keep it simple, 2 benches, right? And what comes next is, what is the material that is filled inside. So yesterday we saw what are the material properties we can put. Let's see again what are these. So in properties we define material. So there are so many definitions that we can put. We can put tensile cracks that we discussed in our slope technology work. So tensile cracks can be put here on the tension zone. We can define supports, that will be doing that later when we introduce supports here, bolting and all. And we'll be today defining materials. So materials in this, there are many options that yesterday we couldn't discuss. So today I'll also tell you some of those. So yesterday we also took sandstone, right? Again, let's take again. We can change the color, because let's put some different color into it, maybe orangish, or yeah, light orange. Yeah. And the unit weight in kilonewton per meter cube. So it's basically the kgs into 9.8 divided by 1000, right? So 2100 into 9.8. So it will be around 20 only, but let's keep it 21. So just for the sake of simplicity, right? Okay, and now these are methods. Different methods are there. Moore Coulomb failure criteria, we are well versed. Tau is equals to sigma plus C plus sigma tan phi. The equations are also given in for each cases. As I was telling yesterday, there are various other methods as well. There is very popular Hook and Brown failure criteria, right? Even in Hook and Brown failure criteria, you can see the defining equation in terms of the principal stress and the other stresses. What inputs it take, the Hook and Brown failure criteria, is the UCS, S, and M factors. Now, what are these S and M factors? I think some of these you might have studied in your rock mechanics classes, but still, if you don't know, what we can do is, so in this it is not there. Okay, so there is a full library of how these factors are obtained for each and every type of rock. I will show you that later on how this is done, but I don't think that is available for this cracked version. So when we click on this, basically we can actually get the values of S and M based on what type of rock is there. So that becomes easier. But for each S and M, there are definite equations containing factors like what is the disturbance in the rock, how much fragmented it is, or what is the infilling material, or weathering pattern. Even I think it includes the disturbance factor as well. So based on GSI ratings and all, we can find that. This okay in generalized Hook and Brown criteria, this becomes even easier. So as there is a GSI calculator here. See, when we go for generalized Hook and Brown, so in this GSI calculator, what becomes is intact. So for this generalized Hook and Brown failure criteria, uh, we actually can simulate most of the rocks. Most of the rocky surfaces, this generalized Hook and Brown failure criteria is very applicable. Why it is? Because uh, in Moore Coulomb failure criteria, we do not take care of small disturbances like joints or weathering or maybe disturbance due to blasting or anything like that. We basically assume that the whole mass is having a uniform cohesion, having a uniform friction, and that's why if you select Moore Coulomb, so it just asks the value of C and phi, right? So that's what it requires because it has these assumptions. In generalized Hook and Brown, we basically have the option of putting other factors into consideration as well. So if I and these factors are basically based on all empirical relations which the scientists have developed by seeing which type of rock is being used and all. So when we click on GSI, we see that we can put the UCS. So UCS is given here in kilopascal. It's basically we can even pick from the list of in rocks that we have. So you can basically see what is the field estimate of strength. Like if we can see that it is indented by thumbnail. If you just put the thumbnail and it is indented, that means it has a very low strength. While a specimen only can be chipped with a geological hammer if you put. So in terms of how a geological survey is done, there are many methods. When we see a rock, how we decide what it is, how much strength it is. So we try to first see how much crumble it does when we touch it, or if we try to put our nail inside and see how hard it is, or we try to see put a hammer and knock it with a hammer and see how much does it fail easily, does it has a good strength. So in geological field survey, it's not easy to just get the value of UCS, right? So we have to just approximately estimate that, and based on these estimations, they are very subjective, obviously, because for me, crumbling with hand and for anyone else crumbling with hand will have different strengths. But just overall picture of generalized approximations. So they basically translate into some strengths in megapascal. So even for stones, they have given what kind of rock it is there. So in chalk, rock salt, potash, what kind of strength will be there, what kind of will be in the sandstone, limestone, 50 to 100 megapascals, and so on. So they have given various kind of strength. Let's select maybe sandstone because we are doing for sandstone. So once we press 50 to 100, it has basically taken the average of that. So uniaxial compressive strength, it has taken 75. We can change it as per our maybe we have tested in lab, so we know that okay, our sandstone which we use basically gives us not more than 40 megapascals. So let's keep that as 40 megapascals and click OK. Okay. Then there is a GS index, geological GSI index. So that we can easily calculate by this chart. I think all this is mostly covered in your rock mechanics classes, but still, based on what kind of structure we have in our rock and what is the surface condition, we give each rock a GSI number or index. So in this case, we have let's assume we have some blocky nature of rock, but the surface condition is good enough. So let's keep it on the border of very good and good, and let's keep it as 70. Once you click here, it will automatically take the value. Similarly, for intact rock constant, that is Mi, right? How it is calculated, generally most of the type of rock have some. So we basically try and find our type of rock. Sandstones are there, yes. So we just select the sandstone and it has given the Mi value of 17. And disturbance factor. So disturbance factor is basically how much disturbed a rock will be, and that is based on what activity is going on or what type of slope has been formed. So is the slope formed due to mining activities? So in mining activities there will be blasting activities going on, mechanical excavation going on. So there will be some disturbance, higher disturbance factors, right? In rock cut slopes, maybe there is one time cutting and that's it. So that time, if a good blasting is done or good excavation is done, mechanical excavation, maybe the disturbance factor is less. So we can basically give a value of 0 to 1 in terms of disturbance factor. So let's give 0.2 if we want to assume that it is some way disturbed, right? And that's it. On the basis of these four, it basically calculates MB, S, and A. So these are the parameters required for our generalized Hoek and Brown. Now, please do understand these are not foolproof methods, right? We can get these estimates easily now, and it seems that okay, when if I go and see a rock on the site and judge its maybe how much strength it has and how much broken it is or what is the joint pattern or the surface condition, I can get all these properties and do the simulation work. But most of the time in my experience, what happens is these values and the values that are actually on the field do not match exactly. And that time we have to do basically a validation of the model. So that we will also learn how to do that. What are the things that we change? So validation is basically when we make a simulation model, we try to match the present condition of the field with the simulation model. So like if we see that in the field there is a start of failure that is happening, like the rocks are starting to fall or there is a movement that can be seen or something like on those lines. So if that is the condition and in our simulation we get a factor of safety of 5.8, so that doesn't make sense, right? Because in field we are seeing that the stability is not that good. And if a factor of safety of 5.8 is giving a very good stability, right? So that time we have to change the properties and try and bring the properties to the value that we think would be close enough to the field variables or the field conditions. That is called the validation of model. So in this slope stability, this is the way. There are many other cases where we try to measure the actual movement, the strain developed by the strain gauges, putting here and there. So there are many other methods also for validation, but very grossly I have explained what the concept is. Anyways, let's put these values of sandstone here. So now if you roam around on this material, you can see how the strength and everything is obtained from here. Now let us assume that it is we want to add more material, or it is not just single sandstone, it is layered sandstone with sandstone and shale type of material. So we want to add basically another material in that, and to do that we put a material boundary. So let's say that this full uh, slope is divided into three zones, right? First zone is sandstone on the top, in between there is shale, and another zone is sandstone again. So for that, we have to basically break it into two places so that we can make three materials. So by adding the boundaries, add material boundaries, we have basically adding uh, some zones in which we can fill the other material. So like this, I have made a three-part zone. Now I can actually put some second material. Let me define the second material. Let's suppose it is shale. Shale color generally is what? Maybe light gray. Yeah, it is dark gray. And it's let's put quantities of shale in more Coulomb criteria only. Not let's not take other the GSI aspect. So let's put the cohesion of shale at 30 and phi at 32. Okay. Unit weight of shale will be less than sandstone, right? Yeah. So let's keep it at 20. That's okay. And we click OK, right? So right now we have not assigned that second material to any place. So right click where we want to, and we see an assigned material. So we assign the shale. Now we see how a banded type of geometry can be designed in here. Even we can make many other bands, and even in field there will be banded type of geometries mostly. So we have to know based on what kind of joint patterns are there or what kind of layers are there, our seams are there, so we can put it here and accordingly we can design. So let's move ahead. These were we have defined the materials, we have defined how to assign these in a boundary, in a geometry. Now now comes the analysis part. So in analysis part, there are loading. We can put additional loads. So suppose there are this area, if we say, is a ramp, and on this ramp generally two dumpers run. So we can find out what is the load that a dumper applies, and we can basically add a distributed load. So we what kind of load is there, and what is it a triangular load or is it a constant load that is there? So let's say we have a vertical load due to a dumper, and it is applying 100 kilonewtons per meter square. So and it is being applied in this zone, the ramp. So this is loaded now, right? So we basically are simulating a condition where heavy dumper movement is also there here, and a geometry which is a relatively high steep geometry with different layers of material, sandstone, shale, and sandstone. Okay. So this can be loading. There are other methods also. You can put single point load. I have added distributed load there that you saw. We can put seismic load. So seismic load are basically, we are very prone to this seismic zones, such as high seismicity areas like Himalayas and all. So we can put what kind of seismic load we want to in terms of forces that are applied in horizontal and vertical direction. So that is possible. Let's not do that right now. Let's do that in a later example, right? We will be moving on to surfaces. Now we want to create a grid. As yesterday we were discussing, we have to now find out what are the slip circles and which are the slip circles that give us the best or the most, the worst factor of safety. So that worst factor of safety will be our prime, one of the prime ways to basically we have to deal with those, right? First. So that will be the areas of first support, and later on, based on what kind of factor of safety we obtain, we can design our support accordingly. Okay, so let's do a surface grid. So in surface options, what we have defined is, we can actually define what kind of failure can be. So there are two options for us. There are circular failures and non-circular failures, right? And based on what we select, we have the type of grids or the type of ways in which the slip circles will be decided. Search method that is here. So in circular grid, circular failure pattern, we have a grid search, slope search, or a auto refine search. So these are basically algorithms which decide how to put the center as well as what is the radius of the slip circle. So yesterday, if you remember, we were discussing two things are there. One is the center of the circle and one is the radius of the circle, right? These two things define which slip circle we are dealing with. So all these algorithms are based on that. So in non-circular failure, what happens? This is a composite sort of failure or a block sort of failure. So it will search either a block or we can actually provide a block for it that, okay, this is the most probable failure zone. So we will be looking into the non-circular failures also at some stage. So yeah. So let's just start as a circular failure and click OK. We can actually create a grid. So if we want to create a grid, we can add a grid. So I want uh, a grid to be placed here that may have like 50 by 50 points. So I want like 2500 points as centers, and that will be my analysis part that, okay, I want to add a grid here, right? Because it's such a steep slope, I want more points. And I want 50 by 50 points here. So because I have drawn it manually, it has given me some aspect ratios according to which it had calculated some X and Y intervals. So, but I have basically forced it to divide the whole grid into 50 by 50 uh, nodes. So it has done that now. Okay. Now we have 2500 points here and different these will be drawn. So 2500 points will be inside and there will be some more points on the boundary edges. So total including we have 2601 points. As you can see, this is giving search grid information is given. So in X direction there are 50, Y direction there are 50, so that is 2500, right? And the total boundary, including boundary, all the points included, that will be 101 more points. So 50 plus 50, I think, and one, the last one. Anyways, that doesn't matter. So once we have decided the grid, once we have done with our geometry, we have defined the material properties, we have given any loading if that is required, right? So now we are ready to basically start simulation or they start the calculation work. Before that, we just save our file. So, okay. So CamTut2, let's do that. That's it. And now we go for analysis part where we can basically go into compute. Compute is will basically do our computational work. So once we do compute, it will start the computation. Now since I had made so many points and we started with 50 slices, so there are total of 28,611 surfaces, right? It has to compute that. So it takes a lot of time in these kind of complex simulation work. So that's why what is recommended is always to keep the number of points, number of surfaces to a lower extent if that doesn't compromise our accuracy of that output. So there is to be maintained a balance. If we go for a higher value of computation, if we go for higher number of slices, if we go for higher number of surfaces, basically it will take more time. It will take more computational resources, but it will give us very accurate results. However, on the other hand, it takes more, if we go for lower values of these, it will be quicker, but the accuracy will be low. So uh, there are many ways in which we can do that to reduce the amount of time to compute. We can reduce the number of grid points that we took like 2600 right now. So we can, in place of that, we can take like 250 or 300 maximum. Last time we took those. Uh, we can actually decrease the number of slices. We increased it to 50. That can be done. We can decrease the threshold is even. So, oh, sorry, increase the threshold. So by increasing the threshold, basically we stop the computer at an early stage of simulation. So that also can be done. Mm, what else? There are other methods as well. Basically, to make it less complex for a computer to simulate. So let it do that. Basically, till that time, we'll learn something else also. Let's make a new one. Mm, yeah, I'll keep it aside for now. So we have made a new one. Now, what we want to do is in this, we want to create a base first, and we want to simulate a dump slope sort of. So in a dump slope, what happens is we already have a base. So it looks something like something on the lines that there will be a base of it, right? And the the main dump, if we cut a cross section, it will look be similar to mine benches, but the berm would be very small because no dumper or any movement is required, and the base will be stable, right? So a typical external dump can look like this. Let me put more material boundaries here. So this is the our base layer. Let's assign some material 4. This is our dump material. So assign maybe material 2. So there will be many things in this that we have to learn for a dump kind of overburden dump, that is an external overburden dump that we have. So generally these steps are made in order to decrease the overall slope as we do in benches. But these are basically uh, continuous ramps sort of. So initially these are used for dumping, but slowly and gradually the dumping is done on top, and the material is allowed to fall. So these basically fill up and small gaps are only left. So there are different kind of dumping. Step dumping is there, and there is a drop down dumping, top bottom dumping. There are different types of dumping that we can actually take one class on that as well, that how many types of dumps are there and how the stability changes with that. So a typical dump slope can be visualized in this sense. So what happens is in this there are the material used here is basically highly crushed and fractured rock. So basically the dump material will be the blasted out material, right? So the blasted out overburden material will be dumped and keep on, the piles will keep on increasing one after the other, right? And once we reach here, we will make a separate pile, and the other step will be a separate pile, and so on. So that's how this kind of dump will be made. So its properties can also be either defined separately for the 3 layers because the level of compaction will be different, or we can basically do it in a single, but we can average out the properties. So that also can be done in many cases. That is also done. Let me divide it into 3 zones of different compactions, and let's see what happens in that. So let's define this as material 1, this as material 2, and this as material 3. And the bottom one is already material 4, right? So let it be like that. Now, in these, let's go to define materials, and now we see we have the fourth material that is the base of it. So let's put its name as base, right? And we want it to have no effect on basically any calculations of slope stability, because we know that we are in basically dumping on the ground, and slope failure we are basically interested in only the top material for now. It can be that there may be conditions that even the base can be affected by the huge dumps, but for now we are basically defining it as a base, the lower part. So let's put it as infinite strength here. So tau basically becomes infinite. And now basically whatever happens, generally the slip circles even won't be affecting this base. So that is done. Now material one is maybe a top layer, right? Yeah, layer one. Let's do that. Material two is layer two, and material three is layer three. So as we go from top to bottom, the compaction will increase, right? So let's put that in terms of unit weight as well. So compaction wise, let's put this as 16, right? 16 kilonewtons, or maybe 18 here, and let's put that as 17.5, and the last one as 16. So we are seeing that, oh, I did the opposite, sorry. So the first one will be 16, second one will be 17.5, the last one will be 18, right? So we are seeing as we move down, due to the compaction, basically the unit weight is increasing. Unit weight is the measure of the bulk density. So the due to the compaction, the bulk density is increasing. Now, what type of failure criteria you want to put? So obviously, Moore Coulomb failure criteria is one. There are others as well, but for now, let's assume these as homogeneous. Cohesion and friction will be different for different rocks. So let's put different values here. The lowest one, the rock may have a cohesion of 25 kilonewton per meter square, and the friction angle as 35. Let's put that. Okay. Layer 2 will have 18.7 and a friction angle of 32, and this will have 18 and a friction angle of 30. So as we again, by compaction these figures change, so we are just basically trying to simulate how these different layers actually affect different and the factor of safety basically, and the slip circle behavior, right? So we click OK. That's what we want to do. And what else? Yeah. So in this, let's not keep the water as a criteria. So let's do that. And now what we will be doing is, in place of creating a grid, we will be creating a we'll be doing a auto search grid option. So let's go to surface options, and we are saying that okay, it is a circular failure. Let's assume it as a circular failure, and what we want to is it's a auto refined grid, auto refined search. So auto refined search, what it does is this option doesn't require us to place a grid of centers here. In place of that, it basically tries to find out possible centers that will have lower factor of safety based on what results it obtained in the last iteration. So uh, suppose it started with this zone, and in this zone it created like 10 or 15 centers, and found out okay, these are the circles and this is the factor of safety. Based on the movement it does, like on the right or on the left, it sees what is the difference between the factor of safeties, and based on that, it basically defines the next uh, set of centers. So if it is seeing that by going away, the factor of safety decreases, so it again goes further away a little bit, further away a little bit, and so on. So I am giving you a very gross understanding of how this algorithm works, but auto refine search is based on similar principles, that how whatever factor of safety it gets, based on that it basically moves ahead. So there are certain parameters that we have to give: the divisions along the slope, how many divisions it want to, circles per division, number of iterations, and divisions to use for the next iteration. So for the next iteration, how many divisions to consider for movement. So let's put whatever the default values are. So 10, 10, 10, 10, let's put that. And we put a composite surface. So composite surface basically is saying that even non-circular failures can be accommodated in that. So perfect circles may not be necessary. So let's put that as well, because it's a dumb kind of material, right? So let's click OK in that. And now we are ready. So let's save this as 3. And we can basically start the analysis. So this one was very quick, and even you couldn't see how this analysis was done as compared to the other one, which is still going on, the last one. So we are waiting. So this one, let's see the analysis results. So this, if you go to the analysis part, you see interpret. So interpret is the software that basically interprets the results, right? Now, now this is the critical factor of safety, or the lowest factor of safety it could find throughout the slope. That is 1.082, and this method is Bishop. So let's do Jumbo. Jumbo is even lower. So we didn't select the other method, so it is just showing the 2. That's okay, because we want to see what happens with different layers. So this is one. Now I wanted to show you a few things in this interpret software that is for finding out what are the factor of safeties and all. So this the only circle that will be visible by default will be the lowest factor of safety circle, right? That that gives us the least factor of safety found on all the iterations it did. But we can actually see what are the all iterations it did. So for that, we basically click this button, that is all surfaces, or you can find this in data as well. So data column, all surfaces. So if we click that, you see how many surfaces are here, right? How many surfaces are here, and what is the pattern now it has created to basically see how the movement of centers are there. Now see, now you can understand how the movement might have been. So it might have started from here, and it saw that, okay, uh, as we move, there are some vertical and some horizontal sets of centers, and accordingly basically it has created an algorithm. So because these are the centers, it is getting the maximum the minimum factor of safety. So that's how it will basically extend the new centers. So among those, all the centers that it had created, we are getting the least factor of safety at this point. So this is not done in a grid search. Grid search basically restricts us in the grid that we do. So it has positives, that it doesn't take that much time because we have defined a grid. However, it has negatives, that it is restricted, and such kind of analysis that we see can't be done in grid search. So based on what we want to do, like we want it to be quick, or we don't have any idea what type of surfaces can be there. So let's do a auto grid search. So auto gridding is this. So basically it takes different algorithms to decide which are the centers, and accordingly it finds the surfaces, the circular surface of failures. Now we can, now this is very hodgepodge, right? So many circles are mixed and we can't see much. Let's see if we want to say, okay, uh, I want to see only the circles that are below 1.5, because that we want to see maybe 1.5, we want to put as a 1.5 as the factor of safety, that is threshold for us. To find out that, we have these filter options. So even when we press that, certain this kind of window appears. So in there we have options that what we want to do. So we can basically put surfaces with a factor of safety below 2. So we can put 1.5 here, and when we apply, so all these surfaces in the yellow or orange part are basically those which have less than 1.5 values. We can even reduce that. So if we put 1.0, there will be none because the least is greater than 0, right? 1.0, right? So if I apply 1.0, there will be no slip circles because even the least is 1.06. So let's keep 1.1 and want to see what are the critical areas. So this full circle is basically the most disturbed part and the critical part that has to be stabilized, right? If we want to see which are the least tense surfaces, lowest factor of safety, we can do that as well. Least 10, least 20, least 50, and so on, whatever you want. We can even give a range of factor of safety, zero point 0.5 to 1.5 or something like that. So maybe we can give a value of 1.0 to 1.5 and we can apply that and find out. So these are those. And there are certain surfaces that do not compute due to so many reasons. So if we want to see those, there will be some issues with those. So that also can be seen. But for our purpose, we just focus on lower factor of safety ones and find out what are their values, right? So this is a useful tool where we can see which are the critical surfaces, which are the surfaces that have very low factor of safety, and we can basically find low factor of safety aspects of that, right? Uh, what else can be done? We can actually create a query. So query basically means we want to know which are the values in this zone. So if we want to see each of these factor of safety, we can basically now click on these centers and we can get the values of this. So this function we can use in querying. Querying has certain other aspects as well. We can graph the data of queries. We can even see the slices. So let me show you that. Let's remove these queries and show you the slices. So you see how this whole circle, the slip circle, that is the critical slip circle, is divided into many slices, and we can actually get the each of the slices data. So this kind of window is there. If we click on the slice, we actually get what is the factor of safety, base friction angle, what is there, what are the conditions of cohesion, slice width, and so many factors that we can see what are the forces, right? So each and every slice we can actually get all the data that the calculation does, and we can actually record that for our use if we want to. So these are some of the visualization tools that this software gives us. Next, what we'll be doing is tomorrow we'll be learning how water interaction. Tomorrow, yeah, tomorrow we have, not tomorrow, day after tomorrow, right? So day after tomorrow we'll be doing some of the MATLAB work as well as some of this how the water affects in this slide interpretation. So we'll be learning that. Okay. Uh, right now I will be stopping because already time is there, time is reached. If you guys have any doubts, any questions till now, I know it's too much data input for you. But what I want to show is what we can do. And when we do go for maybe a lab class, we will get these softwares for you and you will be doing this by yourself. So I think that will be the time it will be easier to understand. And when you get hands-on training, you know what you are doing, right? But how things are done, what things can be done, this we have to know. So that's why these demonstrations are important. Right. So any questions till now? Uh, any comments, any suggestions, anything you guys want to clarify? Please have, please you can tell now. All right. No one is here. Is there? Anyways, so hope you understood some aspects of how limit equilibrium processes are being worked. We'll see some more examples. We'll see some examples of water, some examples of bolting, how the factor of safety is changing, and so on. And the, let's progress in this and see where we go further, right? Okay, then for me, that's it. Thank you guys for coming. I will be uploading that assignment that I was talking yesterday. So you can make programs for MATLAB programs for those questions, the 2-3 questions that we discussed in rock slope technology, right? So that will be useful in our programming skills as well. So that we can do. And we'll be discussing those day after tomorrow when you have the class. Most probably we'll be meeting at 9:30, but I will inform you whatever the time is, right? Okay, guys, sorry to keep you waiting. I think Sahu sir and who else is waiting for you? Jayantu sir is waiting for you. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much. See you again day after tomorrow.
Good afternoon, sir. So regarding the project,
Good afternoon, Swati. Yes, tell me.
sir, actually we have been asked to